Hi, everyone. Thank
Hello.
you so much for having us. We're really looking forward to talking with you tonight. This is going to be informal. Sebastian sadly has a commitment on Wednesdays, so he's going to start it off and we'll back into this presentation a little bit, but we really want this opportunity to talk to you about honeybees, which we love, and answer any questions that you have. So I'm going to turn it over to Sebastian, who will bring us through the first segment of the presentation.
Yeah. So, hi.
Hi, welcome.
Thank you. So, I am the founder of what we call Milton Billion Backyard Bee Project, and I started this hive when I was around.
I'll do that. You can talk.
When I was around 8 years old, I started beekeeping when I was 8 years old. And that really started off with my mom coming home one day and saying, "Hey, I think you're old enough now. We're going to have bees." And I didn't really know what to think about it at first. So I just kind of said, okay, and went along with it. And then a little while longer, we went on vacation and we came back and our hive had died.
Well, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't know that at the time. And my mom, when we came back from vacation, my mom noticed something was off with the hive and sent me inside. Later, she found out they had died, and we weren't sure.
She didn't tell you the truth.
Yeah, she didn't tell me the truth. We weren't sure what the reason was, but at first she didn't tell me and told me that they had just absconded. They flew off to our friend's hive around the corner. And then about a year later, a little less than, she told me the truth in that they had died. At this time I was 9, and I decided we wanted to know why. To this day we still don't know exactly why, but we think it has to do with pesticides, or pesticide spraying in our area.
Yeah.
Actually, if you see right here, this is a dead bee and its tongue is sticking out. This is what our dead bees looked like when we got back from vacation. A tongue sticking out of the bee means that they were poisoned, so this is why we think it was pesticide spraying. And because of this, I wanted to do something about it. So I created Milton Billion Backyard Bee Project, and the purpose of this project is to spread awareness about honeybees and how important they are to humans in general, but just to the environment, and to encourage people to either become beekeepers or plant bee-friendly flowers, and to try and use less pesticides.
Oh.
So our main goal was to get 20 hives in Milton, which we now have just above. And these hives are in our host backyards. So hosts are people throughout our town who are willing to have beehives that we manage in their backyard. So not all of our hives are in host backyards. We have around 5 in our backyard.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have others in community sites, such as Fuller Village and New England Base Camp. And we realized along the way that having these community site hives really helps spread awareness about bees in general. So as you can see in the pictures, these are some of the events we've done to help spread awareness. The two pictures with the colorful hives, it was actually when
we started the hive.
Yeah, we had these scouts. So this is a group of scouts, adventure scouts, who painted these hives, and that was one way that we spread awareness. And then every year or so, maybe a few times a year, we go to New England Base Camp, which is this picture here on the right, and we have a little lesson, I guess you could say, like we're having now. We do that with the kids, and the kids at New England Base Camp come from all around Massachusetts, New England. So this is a really great way for us to spread awareness about bees, not just in Milton, but kind of throughout the whole East Coast.
Fantastic.
Good. That's, you can say even.
Yes.
So this is one of our hives. We work really closely with New England Base Camp, so we don't just have hives on their property, but they have created really nice informational signs for us and they support us throughout the whole thing. Along with the Fruit Center, New England Base Camp helps donate some money to set up these 3 hives that are there, or 4 hives that are there. And they continue to help keep the environment around or in that area really nice for the bees.
Healthy.
Wow.
Do you want me to talk about this
Sure.
one? Sure. So Sebastian's going to transition, sadly, and I'll take it from here, and Ray will.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
He'll be in here. A few more pictures. Do you want to come over, Ray?
What is this? What's
So we're just going to switch seats for a minute. Actually, I'm going to
Hill
put.
Village? You know where that is?
Okay.
Yeah, it's I think around by Stoughton or something.
Oh,
It's a assisted living for seniors.
So our second community site, which we're super equally excited about, is at Fuller Village in Milton, and it's an independent living community. And they were really interested in, well, I should say a group of really committed and interested individuals wanted to set up beehives at Fuller Village. However, there was a lot of fear associated with it. When you mention bees, people kind of run the other way. And honeybees are very benign. They don't bother you. Yellow jackets certainly will chase you and they'll bother you. But this group of individuals, which are these folks here, we worked with the whole community, but with a subgroup to really help educate the entire Fuller Village, it was 2 sites in Milton. And they really came together to spread awareness throughout the 2 sites. We held a number of educational meetings and presentations. We met with small groups. We toured where the best place would be and had everybody involved that wanted to be involved decide where the best site for the bees were going to be. So that way there was a lot of ownership attached to having bees here. So about 9 months into the program, it was about that time to install the bees. And we had invited anyone that was interested in the community to come out, and it was a bitter cold day. And we were shocked that we had probably 20, 30 individuals all lined up in various places coming to install the bees. And it's been now 5 years. We've probably educated thousands of families, but a different generation, a different demographic, very different than New England Base Camp. And we've had opportunities to bring both groups together as well. So let's see. So this is just a couple of things. This is when Sebastian was really little. We brought in the bees at an observation hive, and we had lots of folks come in and take a look at inside, as close as you could be to see the bees. And then we had the chefs in the dining room. They were super interested in this as well. So what we do is we give them bulk honey throughout the season, and they made this amazing honey cake. And then we had everybody share the honey cake. But there were great opportunities, and continue to be really effective opportunities, to talk about pollinators, the environment, what's needed, where we need some help and some advocacy. And both groups have been phenomenal around that. Do you want to say anything about the 2 sites? No? Okay. Okay, so any questions before we go into bees? I'm not sure you are screen sharing. I can't see the questions at the moment. If there are questions, I can't see them. So if anyone has a question, just flag us somehow. So now we'll talk a little bit about honeybees. If we can get to the next, there we go. So do you want to take it?
Yeah. So, why are honeybees so important? Because about 1/3 of our food, the food that we regularly, the people eat here, is connected to honeybee pollination. So honeybees themselves are not native to North America. but they were brought over really back in the day when the founding fathers came over to help pollinate the new fruits and vegetables that the settlers brought with them. And so they've been here for quite a long period of time. And as you can see from the picture, this is on the left-hand side, you've got a very healthy raspberry there. And on the right-hand side, you can see the effects of poor pollination on the plant itself, and how the fruit just doesn't develop properly if it's not correctly pollinated. So very important. If we move on to the next slide, you can see, so this is a picture, everybody's seen in their supermarket. This, I think, is Whole Foods. What it looks like normally when you go in, probably first thing early in the morning before anybody's taken all the fruit. But if we didn't have bees,
Yep, the other way.
then it would look like this, because it wouldn't affect the oranges, but it would affect a lot of the local fruit that's grown in the region and around the country.
Vegetables.
Particularly and more importantly, the vegetables. So bees are the honeybee is very, very important. They're not the only pollinators. There are probably 150 to 200 pollinators. Some are very specific to individual plants, and others can pollinate multiple plants. But the honeybee is the most efficient and most effective. So that's why it's so important that we keep these. And what's happened over the years, just a little bit of history, is that I think back at the end of the Second World War, there were 5 million hives in the USA. And by about, let's say, 10 years ago, that had dwindled to 1 million. So we had lost 80% of our honeybee population. Now, it's become a lot more popular over the last couple of years, and that's started to grow back up. But still, we're a long way from where we used to be in terms of beekeeping. So, when we talk about a hive, we need to think about who lives in the colony, who lives in the hive. And the hive is really an interesting entity. It's almost an entity in its own right. Although we think about, and Michelle mentioned this earlier, a healthy hive is 50,000 to 80,000 bees in the summer. So a huge number of bees, but they act like a single entity. And that's because there's a single controller, the queen, a single manager, a single director, the queen, who controls.
Notice how I let the Englishman talk about this. It's
who controls everything in the hive. So just one queen in the hive, and her job is to basically, populate the hive. It's to lay eggs and preside over the hive. So she lays between 1,500 and 2,000 eggs a day when she's fully fertile. So that's an incredible amount. The workers are all female. So the bulk of the population of the hive are worker bees, and their role is to collect food and water, to care for the larvae the young bees, and to guard the hive, amongst other things. Do we have to slide about jobs? Okay, not yet.
No, we'll do that later.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the remaining members of the hive are the drones, and their only purpose is to mate with queens. So unlike the queen and the workers, which represent about 20% of the total, they do not have stingers. They can't sting you. They're bigger, but they don't sting. And their only job is to mate with the queen or queens from other hives and make them fertile so they can lay their eggs. So that's the.
Can I give a couple of interesting facts?
Sure.
So a couple of interesting facts about the drones. Once they mate, they can only mate one time, because then they die. So they have their one opportunity. They fly with a flock of drones, and the queen mates with about 20 to 30 drones in the sky, and then whoever she mates with dies. Whoever she doesn't mate with goes back to the hive. The second very interesting fact about drones is the hive during the winter is an all-female hive. So come the fall, the behavior that we see is the workers start booting out the males from the hive and they die. So maybe a couple will stay there, but basically it's 100% from about October, November to February, all female hive. So that's a fun fact. I can't see you, so I can't see your faces, but I would imagine.
Imagine the ladies are
Yeah.
they kick the men out because they don't have a role. They
They
don't
eat too
want
much.
they don't want them to eat the stores, the honey stored for the winter, which is what keeps the bees alive. So just on that, the bees don't. People often ask, do bees hibernate? And the answer is no. What happens is in the winter they cluster together in a ball around the queen to keep the ball, keep the bees themselves and the queen at a constant temperature of 95 degrees, or around 92, 95 degrees. So they're kind of collectively like us. Our temperature, our body temperature is independent of what's going on outside. We keep ourselves at 98.4, I think, or 98.6. The bees don't get quite that warm, but they collectively keep themselves at around about 95 degrees, and they do that by clustering in a ball. And then when the bees on the outside get cooler, they migrate to the center of the ball, and the bees on the inside are surrounded by other bees flapping their wings to generate heat. They move to the outside to cool down. So it's a constant flow from the inside to the outside of the ball. Keeps the queen warm. And then you can see the queen's, as I said, the queen's job is to lay eggs. You can see on the left-hand side, on the right-hand side, excuse me, of the slide, the comb, the honeycomb, and the honeycomb is used to store.
Oops.
The honeycomb is used to store. Sorry, we're having some technical issues of our own here, to store the honey and pollen, but it's also used by the queen to lay her eggs, and it's where what we call the brood, the babies, are developed. And she lays eggs, they get fed
This is one right here.
with
Royal jelly.
royal jelly for 2 or 3 days, and then with what's called bee bread, and they get the comb gets capped. You can see that on the left-hand side. That's capped comb, and the larva develops inside that capping until it becomes a fully grown bee.
21 days.
After 21 days, and starts to eat its way out. So more pictures of the hive. Again, on the left, you can see some capped brood that we just saw, but also you can see where they've stored pollen. So the pollen is
Used to make bee bread.
yeah, it's used to make bee bread. Sorry, I was thinking about it's their source of energy, protein. So it's the source of protein. They use it to make bee bread that feeds the babies and feeds themselves. And then they also, of course, they get the nectar, put that into the honeycomb
Right here.
down the bottom there, and they cap that so that they keep it until it's the water content is down to about 18%, 17-18%, and then they cap that, and that then will keep for a very long time. But they obviously cap it
comes in.
until the beekeeper comes and takes it away. But they keep that capped so that it will stay fresh for them to use in the winter. They uncap it in the winter when they need additional sources of food.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the hexagon shapes?
Yeah, what's another little interesting fact about bees, and they've been evolving for over 1 million years. They've been evolving for, it's believed, obviously nobody's been around since that long, but it's believed they've been evolving for far longer than humans. And one of the things they've done is to figure out, through evolution, how to design a structure made of wax that can be used to store honey in the most efficient fashion. Efficient meaning that they use the least amount of wax. And it turns out that the hexagon and you can prove this mathematically, and Sebastian's done school projects on this, science projects, but you can prove it mathematically that the hexagon is the most efficient use of a substance like wax to make containers to store anything in. So quite interesting.
So once you realize that, you can start looking around your environment, and you can look at screens and chicken wire and speakers, and you'll see hexagons all over the place. It's really amazing.
And super efficient.
And super efficient.
So we talked about the female bees, and as the female bees develop, they only live for 42 days in the summer during the main part of the season, and then they're replaced by new bees that they themselves have raised. So as they go through their development, they end up taking on 7 different jobs. So you can think about, once every 6 days, they change their job, roughly speaking. So they start out as, when they're recently hatched, as nurse bees and house bees. So their job there is to feed the new brood. They become undertakers when anybody dies, and that's to keep the hive healthy. So they take any dead bees and they take them outside the hive, so they're not contaminating the hive. They become architects, or they're builders. Basically, they have glands that secrete the wax to make the honeycomb. They are cleaners and organizers, so they keep the hive clean. They attend the queen, of course, and then a big part of their job as they develop their wings and can fly is to go out and collect food, collect nectar, and to collect pollen. And you can see on the right there, the pollen attack as they go through flowers. The pollen becomes attached to the hairs on their legs, and they fly that back to the hive and deposit
on each side.
On each side of them. It's kind of like a helicopter with big pouches on either side, and they bring it back and put it into the hive. And then finally, and this is the one you want to avoid a little bit, Michelle said they're fairly benign, and honeybees are very benign, but if they feel that you are coming to attack them, then they send out the guard bees. And the guard bees have one purpose, which is to discourage you from being near the hive, and the way they do that is to sting. So they do sting, but it's only a small portion of the bees, and only really in relatively limited number of circumstances. So
what a beekeeper has to be prepared for are all the different pheromones that are active in the hive. And the guard bee, if the beekeeper is not careful or works too fast, can trigger the pheromone for the guard bees. Otherwise, it doesn't get triggered. So there are times when a beekeeper has to work very quickly that could trigger this pheromone, and then the guard bees will come out. And it's only a couple of them, but they're pretty diligent. And they do die after they sting you. So
they're not incentivized to sting you. It's a kamikaze approach.
You have to move this over.
Okay.
And that's why it's over there. And then this one. Oop.
No, this one.
Nope. We'll try that again. Okay.
Here we go.
Here. Nope, that's not the right one. Oop. Bear with us. This way. Oop. Nope.
Back we go.
All right.
There we go.
Okay, so here. So we heard that folks in Scituate want to become beekeepers. So we're going to give you a few things to think about if you want to become a beekeeper, or if you want to replicate a project like ours in your town. So you want to?
Yeah. So it's important to know what your goals are, because it's evolved over time with the various issues that exist for bees these days, which we'll touch on in a minute, there is, it does require some time to manage a beehive. So you can't put it in the bottom of the garden anymore, the bottom of the yard, and then leave it and expect them to survive on their own. They can, but in general, it doesn't happen that way. In general, they require an amount of management, which I usually say to people is an hour or two a week per hive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's important to know what your goals are and whether whether you're committed to doing that. And then it's very important to get informed and educated. So we always recommend that people join a club and get a mentor. Join a bee club. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But also go to training. So most of the bee clubs offer a training series in the January-February timeframe, in the late winter, early spring, so that people can learn about how to best keep bees. That's usually a couple of hours a week for maybe 6 weeks or 8 weeks, something like that. It's not hugely time consuming, but it's important. It's also important to know what your state and town requirements are as far as beekeeping. Some towns, some locations really have ordinances that prevent people keeping their own bees. Others limit the number of hives that you can have in one location. So, and that differs from town to town and state to state. So very important to know what's specific to your locality. Similarly, in terms of sort of space and location and neighbors, we have beehives in our yard. We don't have a huge yard. It's a relatively modest yard, but the bees are probably 30, 40 feet from our house, and they really don't cause us any problem. We've had no real complaints from our neighbors either. What we did to begin with, as Michelle alluded to earlier, was to invite our neighbors to participate, as we did with the Fuller Village and the other places we've put our hives. We invite people to participate, get them comfortable, get them to feel, maybe get them dressed up in bee suits and have them participate in the installation of the bees, so they feel fairly comfortable. It is important that you have the time, and there is a certain amount of physical strength needed, especially which gets tougher when you get older. And something to think about. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but just to say a full box of frames. Now we're getting in a little bit too technical, but a box of frames that holds honey can weigh as much as 80 pounds. So if it's sort of not the bottom box, but it's the third or fourth box, and you're trying to lift it off the top, it can be pretty strenuous. What we've done is limit the size of our boxes so that we're looking at something more like 40 pounds as a maximum. As we get older, we can't
all of our hives are
we can't lift
mediums.
80 pounds off the top of a hive. Other things to think about is the cost. There's the hive itself, which can run into a few $100s. The bees can be $100, $150. And then other equipment and supplies like feeding them sugar syrup in the fall and the spring, etc. Are things to think about too.
So Sebastian's been super creative in his intervention. What he wasn't as creative was with his business plan. So in order to sustain all of the hives, what we do is sell the honey from the hives. We gift our host families with honey, but we sell a lot of it to recoup some of the expenses. We probably needed to or will rethink that, but there are lots of byproducts that we can create as well to help support this. And now that we're a nonprofit, we can also do grants. And so our business plan has been shifting a little bit, but it's been a super educational plan for Sebastian, and I think just a wealth of information.
Yeah. So involving not only just the beekeeping, but also creating the products, the byproducts, and marketing the byproducts including labeling and being at farmers markets and so on. So quite interesting. Anyway, so last couple of points on here. As we said earlier, be prepared. You will get stung, not frequently, but you will get stung. I mean, if you're going to be a beekeeper, often there are thick gloves you can wear, but they limit what you can do. And so we tend to go with just rubber gloves, neoprene gloves, and the bees can sting through those if they really get annoyed with you. So it happens occasionally, not too bad. And then, but the other side of the coin is that the honey, local honey, tends to collect pollen from obviously the local trees and local bushes and so on. And that pollen, taken in small doses, can help you build up your own immunity to allergies and so on. So a lot of people love to get local honey because it helps them. They swear blind by the fact that it helps them overcome their allergies. So we're going to go a little bit faster now because there's a lot of information here. I don't want to bore everybody, but a couple of other things to be aware of. It's important to get the right location for a beehive, particularly in New England, because whilst it's sunny in the summer, it's cold and wet in the winter, and the hives still need to sort of get some sunlight as much as possible. So a good location for hives is in a larger yard or field with some good windbreaks lower down, perhaps some shade, and a water source for the bees to drink, but nevertheless not too much water. Good drainage so that they're not sitting in damp water. The hives are not sitting in damp field. The management, as we said, an hour or two a week per hive. And that involves, as you can see here, I think those are Michelle's hands with the gloves, taking, and she's got hands around a frame and that's, I mentioned that earlier, and sitting in a box. The box in our hive holds 10 frames, and the bees cover it entirely, as you can see. So the management involves taking each frame out every now and again to check that it's healthy. So we're looking for healthy bees. We're looking for nectar and pollen. We're looking for a lack of diseases, viruses and pests, and any kind of predators like mice. The things that really the biggest issue with beekeeping is called the Varroa Mite. It's a mite, it's a pest that coexists with the bees and lives on their bodies, but it sucks the hemoglobin. And the female mites lay their eggs in the larva of the bees, and they can damage the bees before they're fully developed. So they end up when they're hatched not being healthy enough to do their 6 or 7 jobs that they have, and then that starts to affect the entire hive over time if you let it get out of control. So we put a lot of emphasis on eliminating the mites, but also making sure that some of the other diseases that can happen are not there. So careful inspection, and that's a seasonal thing because it differs by season. When you first get the bees, they'll come in packages. This is what a package looks like. So a package is about 5 to 7 pounds worth of bees. So maybe 5,000, 10,000 bees. They come with a can of syrup so they can be fed, and a queen that's in a cage. The queen isn't necessarily from the hive that the bees come from, so it takes the bees a few days to get used to it. So they protect the queen by putting it in a little separate cage, and then the bees cluster around it.
So the bees and the queen are not family. They're not related. So it's a bucket of bees and a bunch of queens. And again, this is where that pheromone comes into play. After about 3 to 5 days, the pheromone is strong enough that the bees, the hive, will adopt the queen. If that pheromone is not strong, they will kill the queen. The nucleus is just the opposite. They are family. So all of the bees in the nucleus are related to the queen. So that's the second option, which a lot of seasoned beekeepers will purchase a nucleus. It is more expensive than a package. The free way to get bees is we are right now in swarm season. So you will likely see this, or you may not see it, but you'll hear somebody who has talked about a swarm of bees. It's a thunderous noise that happens when the bees are so healthy, it's like they split their stock. So the old queen will go off to a new home. She'll leave a virgin daughter in the hive to start a new hive. We're about 2 weeks ahead of schedule in this region. We had our first swarm on Ray's birthday last week. We were called, but it was too high. If you look on our Facebook page, you can see it. It was too high up for us to get it, so we had to let it go. But beekeepers love to be called to retrieve a swarm in a tree in the side of a house. But you can technically walk through a swarm and you will not get stung. The bees have no brood babies that they're caring for, and they don't take honey with them. So they have nothing to protect. So you could actually, all of us have walked through a very loud, thunderous swarm.
It's very magical, in fact. The normal reaction to swarming is, oh my goodness, we've got bees swarming. What are we going to do about it? How are we going to get rid of them?
We're just going to
But the reality is the swarm is the way that the hive collectively duplicates itself. So it's replicating itself. And as Michelle said, it's actually a very magical thing to do, to walk through a swarm, because they're just flying around looking for the next place to populate, looking for where to create the next hive. And they're not worried about protecting anything. There's nothing to protect. There's no home at that point, and so it's actually very safe. So,
not everyone looks like this.
Not everyone looks like this. Sometimes the bee suits fit, but anyway, this is
Sebastian.
Sebastian, probably one of his early hives bee suits. It was probably a little bit too big for him, but bee suit is very important. Obviously, as we mentioned, if you don't want to get stung, and bees will find a way in to your clothing, which is then if you don't wear a hive suit, which then they get frightened, and that's when they sting you because they get trapped.
Ray has firsthand experience with that. I really wanted to use the EpiPen on him, and he just wouldn't let me. So we had to take him to the emergency room. He actually had his suit wasn't zipped up properly, and they got in the back of his hood. And he's an Englishman, so he just quietly walked away in the yard. And I was like, "Where's Ray?" And I looked over, and he said, I think there's some bees in my hood. And when I looked, he had about 20 bees inside of his hood. And he was okay. He did look a little like Quasimodo for the next few days. But whoops, this went again. Oh.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's, again, occupational hazard occasionally, but you can use, like you see there on the previous slide, there's a smoker. That a lot of beekeepers use it helps calm the bees down. And what it actually does is it tends to make them go into the hive. So when you're working on the hive, it's helpful to have if they're all settled down inside the hive, looking after the queen and not flying around. So that's the value of the smoker. The bee brush helps you to keep them off your clothes, and also brush them off the edges, gently brush them off the edges of the hive when you're trying to close it up. And good gloves help a great deal. So that's some of the basic equipment. And then some of the byproducts, and these are some of the things that we've done. You can see in the center at the top there our honey with a dipping stick. So that's
talk a little bit about the two different kinds of honey.
And on the right hand side there's lip balm that is made with honey, and at the bottom on the right you can see, we don't do this but other people do, is make mead. And is another healthy outcome from the hive, product from the hive. On the left-hand side, it's interesting. If you look at the two colours of those combs there, they both come from the same hive, but at different times. So as you go through the season, at the beginning of the early summer, the honey, based on the flora and the pollen and nectar that's available, will be typically sweet and light. So light coloured and very floral. Towards the end of the season, the plants change and the honey becomes darker. It doesn't darken in the jar. It's darker when you collect it, when we extract it from the beehive, and it tastes more caramely and has somewhat more robust, slightly less sweet as flavour. So we find that in general, children like the lighter ones and adults like the darker ones.
If you like red wine and dark chocolate, then you'll like dark honey. If you like things that are very sweet, then the light is very, very floral. We can't, there is no quality control with honey. So the bees will forage to whatever flowers are in the area and are blooming, but we can never replicate the taste of a honey. It will be similar across the seasons, but it's never the same because the flowers are always changing. And with each extraction, the taste and the color, the flavor changes.
Now that's particularly true because we live in an urban area. If we lived in a rural area where we were growing, acres and acres of buckwheat, for example, then we could say, oh, it's buckwheat honey. But typically in the town, it's just flat floral honey. And you can see on the left there the other different things that you can get. So obviously honey, wax. People make candles out of the wax. Pollen you can use for protein. Propolis is what the bees use. It's kind of taken from the sap of the tree, and they use it to block the gaps where the cold air blows in through the hive, and to almost, it's like a glue that glues the pieces of the hive together.
So it's a resin additionally, and it also works as a natural antibiotic for the bees. So it's what keeps them healthy during rainy season, during the winter. People can make tinctures with the propolis from the hive with alcohol and the propolis, and it too could keep you healthy. But it's really quite an amazing product of the hive that's both for building purposes, but also medicinal for them.
Yeah. So as Michelle says, we make a number of those things, and then we use those to fund our project, which is now gotten to be quite significant in terms of both costs and so on. So if you're interested, then certainly there's lots of resources now. If anybody's interested in becoming a beekeeper, but if that's going too far, there's other things that you can do today. Obviously, creating a bee-friendly and a pollinator-friendly habitat, really important to everybody.
Well, that doesn't actually mean eliminating pesticides. That's obviously what we would love everyone to do, but we want people to be comfortable and take baby steps. So using any kind of herbicide, or if you have to use a pesticide, there are times where you can do it more safely than other times. So in the afternoon, when the bees have come back to the hive and they're getting ready for the evening, by that time it dries by the time they come back out in the morning. So if you have to use it, or somebody really is committed to using it, there are ways in which you can use it more safely than using it in the morning or spraying in the afternoon.
Yeah, so if you think about it from a mosquito control perspective, obviously it's important that we control the mosquitoes, but if it's done, as Michelle said, after dusk, then most of those treatments will be absorbed within an hour or two, and will not affect the bees early in the morning when the bees come out. But when the bees come out, when the sun's up, the first thing the bees want to do is take a drink, and so they'll be on the dew, on the grass, etc., on the plants. and if there's herbicide that's not bee friendly, then they will ingest it. So that will cause.
And they bring that back to the
and
hive.
then they bring that back to the hive, and it goes into the honey and so on and so on. So
But it
affects
also
all the population.
it compromises their immune system. So to loop that all the way back around, when it compromises their immune system, they're not able to pollinate effectively. Thus, you go back to the raspberry picture, and you'll get those pieces of fruit that don't look that healthy.
Yep. So other things, obviously, support local farming by buying local produce, and or you can join a CSA or grow your own food. And obviously, in the supermarket, you can buy food from, or in the stores, you can buy food from local farmers or from a local farmers market. And obviously, we encourage people to go to the farmers market because that's where we sell our produce.
You want to talk a little bit about this picture, and then
this is a picture from the State House. There was some legislation going through which we wanted to support, so we sent our key troops, which was Sebastian and his friend, to the State House to make our point. And obviously, the kids can be a lot more effective sometimes than adults. And we want, so thank you very much for listening. Here's Sebastian enjoying his relaxing time near one of our first hives, and just showing you that, as
you could read a book by a hive.
You can sit and read a book by a hive. If you're not doing anything, to the hive, then they're gonna leave you alone.
My sense is this is probably a short period of time. If you were to ask Sebastian today what he would be doing by the hive, it'd be playing Xbox. So, but he does, as Ray said, our hives are very close to the house and we have a small neighborhood, but just to illustrate that you can coexist with the honeybees. So I think that's about it. We can open it up for questions if you have any.
I have my hand up. Can I ask a question?
Sure, yes, absolutely.
Go ahead, Dean.
Okay.
Sure.
I have sort of 10 cues here, so each is a question, but so I won't ask them all. But let's start with one. I didn't quite get it. The drones, the male part of the hive. They only live for a season. Is that it? They get born in spring and die in the fall. Is that is that their life cycle?
It is, unless they mate with the queen. If they mate with a virgin queen, then they die immediately. So if they don't,
they're reluctant initially there.
Yes.
Okay. And they die in the fall a natural death, or do they get killed by the females?
Probably both. So they are nudged out of the hive. If they're clunky. If they can't fly back into the hive, then they will die of natural causes. Sometimes the bees will sting them, but if they sting them, that means they die. So if the females use their stinger, they can only sting one time, whereas a yellow jacket will sting and then go tell her friends to come back and sting you more. But a honeybee actually dies, and that's because her stinger is barbed, so it goes into your skin, and then as soon as she takes off, the stinger is left in your skin, and
it pulls away from her stomach, and so she then dies.
She dies.
So that kills the female then, right?
Correct.
Exactly. Yeah. So they're reluctant to sting unless they're protecting the hive. So it's all, as in Matt Wiley's terminology, it's all for the good of the hive. It's not about the individuals. It's about the health of the hive.
Right. The second question is bumblebees, and they, I mean, or maybe also wasps and things like that. I mean, they are very similar, I guess, as a species. I mean, they are more similar than they are not similar to humans, right? For example, but the bumblebees, for example, also go to flowers and collect nectar and bring it back. but they don't produce honey, right? Or is that?
Correct. The bumblebees predominantly pollinate tomatoes. So honeybees will pollinate tomatoes, but it's not their first choice. Bumblebees vibrate on the flower, and that's what will pollinate your tomato. They live underground, in the ground, and we call them ground dwellers, but their behavior is a little bit is actually a lot different. The queen will live throughout the year, but she lives solo, and all the bumblebees you'll see will disappear at the first frost. The same thing with the yellow jackets; they'll disappear at your first frost.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so they don't need honey to keep them through the winter because
It's just the queen.
it's just the queen.
Okay.
Michelle, this is a very naive question. I'm fascinated with this whole presentation. There's so much to learn, and you're so well versed on everything. Very silly question. How often do those bees leave the hive? I mean, is it just the foragers that go out and get the food?
Yes, and that's not a silly question. No silly questions when it comes to bees. Yes, the foragers are the ones, when they're matured enough, they will actually go out and forage, as Ray said, for nectar and for pollen. And they're very discreet around, and they're picky about what they will forage for. So they know which flowers, which blooms have the most nutritional value, and they'll go to them first. But they like clusters of the same plant. So if you're going to be purchasing and planting flowers for bees, you always want to do 6 of each, and they will forage on that. So say it's I'm going blank, a coneflower.
Yeah.
So if it's a purple coneflower, you want to plant a lot of them, and you'll see the bees foraging on them first before they actually move to another one. And they know intuitively which flowers and blossoms have the most nutritional value for the period of time that the hive needs whatever it needs.
Yeah, and a couple of other things about it. So what another interesting fact, bees forage between 3 and 5 miles from the hive. So they're not just, they're not just in your backyard. They're out, they can be quite a way away. And in fact, that's one of the reasons we think that they don't really bother the neighbors, because when you look at the bees in the daytime, if the sun's shining, you can see they come out of the hive, they immediately go up, probably up 50, 100 feet, and then they're gone. So they don't hang around. So, and it's just the foragers. So the other interesting fact that most people don't realize is that bees communicate with each other. So when a forager goes out and finds a great source of nectar or pollen, they come back and they do a little dance in the hive. It's called a waggle dance. Yeah, and that dance is, I mean, we call it a dance. I don't know what the bees call it, but they call it speech probably. And
but it has to do with the sun.
But it has to do with the sun, and it tells the other bees the direction and distance of the pollen or the nectar source.
That's amazing. It's amazing.
Oh,
I have a question.
they do a dance that tells.
Michelle, could you tell us a little bit about Sebastian's Eagle Scout project?
Sure. Embarrass him a little bit. He's not here. So he has decided, it's still in progress. It'll probably, we really shouldn't be saying anything yet, so hush. Hopefully we'll be able to say something in the next couple of weeks, but he is going to put 2 beehives in an apiary site at our cemetery in Milton. So the cemetery has just been awarded, it's an arboretum now. So you can't have an arboretum without honeybees. So we have a phenomenal keeper at, or director at our cemetery, and it really does feel like an arboretum. We're very excited that for his Eagle project that he'll be installing 2 hives that we'll be able to manage from the project in the future. So he'll have scouts that will come and create the apiary site and put together the hive boxes, and then the final thing is we'll kind of nurture the bees here until it's installation day, and then we'll have all the scouts come and install the bees at the cemetery. So
Yeah, we're excited because it's
hopefully
it's another community site, because obviously
right.
we don't like to think about it too much, but the cemetery gets quite a bit of traffic from people going visiting there. They like to see it green and flowering, and they like it peaceful. So it's really an idyllic site for bees.
What about mason bees?
Oh, we love them. Mason bees, they're like a solo bee. You can create mason bee hives at your house. I'm not sure exactly what they pollinate, but they're very easy bee to maintain.
They love goldenrod.
They do. So do we.
I have all kinds of wildflowers, huge. Half my yard is wildflowers. And they like the tansies, which come first, but they love that goldenrod.
Yeah, goldenrod makes the most delicious honey, along with buckwheat. It smells terrible, but the buckwheat, that's our favorite, is the buckwheat honey. It's mixed with wildflower, so we actually purchase other people's buckwheat buckwheat honey. Sorry, we like buckwheat flour too.
How do you gingerly get through a swarm of bees? You said some people walk through it?
Yes, you technically can. When we have done this in the past, we were out in Western Mass, and we were at a very large apiary, and there were a couple of swarms, and they just kind of, you can hear them because it's very loud. And the loudness comes from them flapping their wings. They don't have any vocal cords but the buzz you hear is from flapping collectively the wings. They don't actually buzz. So they'll come, like they'll knock you in the head, but they won't sting you because they're flying. They're flying toward the queen, who is up on likely a tree, and they will, if you take a look at I should have put it up because this is now swarm season, but the picture's on our Facebook page, and you can see it's in a pear shape, teardrop shape of a large amount of bees. The bees that swarmed this weekend, it was probably 5 to 8 pounds of bees hanging off this tree limb, and the queen is right in the middle.
Wow.
But you always want to call the keeper.
How serious
I think
is
are you Plymouth County, Scituate in Plymouth County?
Yes.
Yes. So Plymouth County has a bee group. So if you do experience a swarm, you can either call somebody at the town, and they're connected to the Plymouth County Bee Association, and a beekeeper will come and remove the swarm for you.
With a big net?
Yeah.
How do they do it? With a net?
Yes, with a net.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah.
All of the equipment's out in our car right now. So this is the time for the next month or so that we're prepared to go.
I don't know if anybody can see this or not.
Oh, you've got it. There you go.
Yeah.
Can you guys see that?
Thank you, Jean.
Yep.
Yeah, that one was a little too high in the tree, but
And it was huge.
Oh.
there are sometimes there are ways to attract the bees. They're looking for a new hive. So there are products you can buy that look like the bowl of a tree, but they're hollow, but they're artificial. Obviously made out of paper mache, like cardboard. And then you attract the bees to their new place, and then you can close it up once the bees are inside, and then go put them into a new hive. Put it into a wooden hive where you can better manage them. So there are ways to capture them.
Wow.
Hmm.
What an amazing presentation.
No, thank you. I'm sorry Sebastian couldn't be here.
Me
Most
too.
people like to hear him, not us.
Oh, no, you were great. Does anyone else have any other question? I'd love to have you come back, maybe in person. Maybe
Sure,
if
that would be great. We'll
Really?
bring the bees. We'll bring the bees with us.
Look, I have so many questions to ask you, but I don't want to hold up everybody. It was amazing. Anyone else have a question before we close?
No, I do.
Thank you.
Michelle, say somebody here in Scituate wanted to either start hives or start it as a community. Would you be available to, as a resource or to help or anything like that?
Sure, we're available as a resource, but we tend to suggest you connect with the Plymouth County Bee Association because the Plymouth County Bee Association folks know your region and know where the hiccups could be, where the resources are. We're always available on Facebook or a phone call or text. But you want a mentor that can actually come to your site pretty quickly and help you navigate that first year, which is probably the most important, and then going into your second year. What a lot of people don't realize is once you start a hive and it's healthy and you do a really good job, then that means the next season you're going to have 2 hives because you're going to have to split your hives so they don't swarm. So they get too big and you have to actually bring in another one. So, or you have to give them to your family members. And as Jean knows, we have 3 older children, and they're involved in beekeeping a little bit, but not the degree that Sebastian is. Jean, we think Julian, our grandson, might be a beekeeper.
Oh, that'd be fabulous.
Yeah, he's been out a couple of times, so we're excited about that. But you always have to think about that if you do a really good job, you're going to double the amount of hives that you have the next season. So to answer your question, yes, of course we're available, but we really want to ensure that people have a local mentor who knows the area and that can, in a moment's notice, be by your side if you need something.
Well, the Science Center on 123 have beehives.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yes.
That's right.
I
Yeah.
would, if you're interested, connect with them.
Well, can I jump in for just a minute?
Paula?
Yeah, it's Paula.
Paula, you have a question?
I do.
Go ahead, Paula.
I went to the Plymouth County Bee School 15 or 20 years ago.
Oh, yay.
So if you're serious about beekeeping, the bee school is usually in the wintertime. You can just look them up on Facebook or on the internet and you'll find Plymouth County Beekeepers Association. They also have a very active forum on Facebook. But if you go to the bee school, as part of your graduation, they give you a mentor in your neighborhood. And there are a lot of people in Scituate that are part of that group. So that would be the place to start, is with the Plymouth County Beekeepers Association. They meet in Hanson, at least they used to back then.
I think
They're very active. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you for that information.
every county in Massachusetts has its own bee association. So we're part of Norfolk County, but we're involved a little bit with Plymouth, but with Bristol County, Worcester County, and we do a lot of work and share resources with the Rhode Island folks as well.
Okay. Okay.
I get honey from Ghoulies from Scituate. It's from the coastal river home.
Oh, that must be amazing.
Yeah, that's because I use it in my tea, and she sells it, and so does a hardware store.
Oh, fantastic.
Battery. Go, you can run and get the thing.
Wow. Well, until the next time, everybody, first of all, Michelle, Ray, Sebastian, we can't thank you enough for such a wonderful program. I'm sorry we got off to a crazy start, but that's how it goes sometimes. Thank you. We will see you again, I know. And everybody, thank you all for joining us tonight. We'll see you again. Good night. Good night.
Thanks, Michelle.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Jean. Bye.
Jean,
Bye.
thank you, Jean. Thank you, Seth.